Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Lisa Olszewski from the American Institute of Healthy Living, and I have a presentation today that's the very basics of ketogenic nutrition. So I'm going to just kind of prep you, like if you are very advanced in keto and that type of stuff, this probably isn't the presentation for you. We're going to go through a little bit of the history of keto and just talk about simple basic steps to implement this into your daily life. As you know from the other video that I did the other day, the American Institute of Healthy Living, the whole purpose of this is to help make healthy living simple. So you're going to see one of the downloads that you can get from me is the 10 hacks to better your health. So just simple steps, right? Because it's those simple, sustainable steps are what really truly lead to lifelong change. And one of the best analogies that somebody shared with me last week that I've been utilizing a lot, and I love it, is, you know, we look at our children when they're learning to walk. Baby steps, right? So they go from crawling to walking, and do they just start walking right away? No, it's baby steps. They're literally learning things, and sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle. And do we ever look at that child and say, it's okay, give up, like you're never going to be a walker, like my kid, just not a walker, he's going to crawl the rest of his life? No, we really encourage that child to continue on. And I would say the majority of people do at some point learn how to walk, right, as a child. But unfortunately, as adults, we kind of look at things and give up on ourselves a lot, right? Oh, that's just not for me. You know, healthy living, not my thing. It's too hard to be healthy. But here's the reality of it, is that every single decision you make today is going to impact the quality of your life 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So what does it say about you? You know, if you start looking at those things, because nobody literally says in 10 years, I want to wake up and I want to feel miserable. I want to have a whole host of diseases and all this stuff. But to be realistic, that's where a lot of people end up. They wake up at 40 and say, holy moly, what happened to me? Or they wake up at 60 or 70. They just don't feel as great as they could, right? So that's the purpose of the presentation that I'm going to go through today, is to really show you simple steps, because there is also another thing that's going on out there, is that everybody knows this term keto. It's overtaken the Google search engines over the course of the last 2 years as the #1 diet search. It used to be paleo, right? And now it's keto. And so all the time, I think we kind of just, it's our human nature. We find something that seems really attractive and we all go for it, and we might start it for a bit and it might work for us. And then we stop doing what we were doing and we go back to where we were and we're just like, yeah, it didn't work for me. But reality was we went back to our old habits. And so what I want to teach you are just simple steps and just to open up your awareness on certain things. And so that way, if you're a mom and you're trying to figure out how best to incorporate healthy eating for your kids, you know, we'll go through some of that. But maybe, you know, you are an athlete and you want to up your game. You know, we could be in all different aspects, or maybe you are that person that's 30 years old or 40 years old and saying, you know, if I continue doing what I'm doing, I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 or 20 years. So maybe you've had a wake up call lately where you're like, I've got to get my act together. Maybe you haven't had that wake up call, but I'm proud of you for taking the steps for the summit and just watching these videos. So here, that's the deal. That's my backstory. You know, my training, I'm a chiropractor. I'm also a naturopath. I have a bachelor's degree in biomedical science. I have a chiropractic doctorate. And so that's my training. Is I've had a chiropractic wellness practice, and for 15 years. And so over the course of that time period, I've always taught our patients a paleo plan before paleo was ever a term, right? We always said, let's look back as to how our ancestors ate. Because when we look at Paleolithic men, or men and women, they used to live pretty long active lives. I know a lot of times we kind of think, oh, they died early. Well, they typically, unless they were like eaten by a bear or something or chased by a lion, they lived pretty decent lives. They were hunters and gatherers, right? They did a lot of short bursts of activity. They also had something that they would go through feasting time periods and famine time periods. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, because that's important. And that's important to understand as to why your body will adapt and make ketones, which is this whole nutrition, this whole nutrition summit that we're doing. So how did I ever come about wanting to even be a host of a summit, take on this massive project? What had happened to me, and I shared my story recently on a podcast, and I've been pretty quiet about it. Most people don't even know what I went through. But several years ago, like I told you, I've always taught paleo, a low carb paleo at that nutrition plan to our patients. And so, I haven't eaten sugar in years, but I felt as if when I would tell that to my patients that they would judge me. Because here was this person that was eating super clean. Trust me, like super clean. I would have, people come to my house and could not believe how clean everything was. Like there was nothing in my pantry. My fridge was packed because it was all fresh food, but eating super clean, yet struggling to be a size 12. And at that point I was working out consistently. And I really, on the inside, felt like I was being judged all the time by my patients when I would tell them to counsel them on this nutrition, because I felt like they looked at me saying, really? So I did something drastic, and it was against everything in my gut. But at that point, I started really researching a lot of stuff online and was following a bunch of male bloggers, I should say. And the big thing at that time period was intermittent fasting. And so I did that, but I did it to the extreme. So you're going to see a lot of people talking about intermittent fasting. You're going to see me also say, yeah, like I do intermittent fast now, but what I was doing at that time period was having super small eating windows, 7 days a week, weeks on end, turning into months on end. So as you'll learn throughout these presentations, intermittent fasting is amazing, but just not like that. And so for me, I ended up going through a lot of different health issues with it. I did lose weight. I always tell people, hey, I lost weight. And that's the worst thing that I really don't like about our society is how many people would come up to me and say, you look fantastic, because I had lost this weight. But on the inside, I was cringing because I knew, they thought I looked healthy, but on the inside, I was miserable. Like I was miserable. And so that's something I'm sharing with you. I'm opening up because I'm just like you, right? And so I've lived and learned. And that's the thing, I see a lot of times as different doctors, we go through our own healing process because that's the best way we can teach others. And so from that situation, I went through and changed a lot of stuff. Like I said, I still intermittent fast, but I don't do 3 or 4 hour eating windows for 7 days a week, weeks on end, turning into months on end. Like, don't do that. You're going to learn how to intermittent fast throughout this program. If that's, I'm not recommending that at all. So through that, I realized there's probably a lot of people like me out there, because you can get online and you can search for a lot of stuff too. Like I have a lot of educational, professional education back there too. But what about for the general consumer, that if you just start searching online, where do you go, right? There's so much conflicting information out there. And so that's what started the American Institute of Healthy Living, which now we have launched this ketogenic summit. And what my whole purpose is to give you those simple, sustainable steps to show you that healthy living is not anything difficult. It is just being conscious and being aware and making good decisions, even if it's a baby decision today. If all you do is decide to eat a little bit of something green today, like some spinach or whatever it is, and that's the only thing you do today through next year, that's the only change that you make, do you think your body will be healthier or sicker a year from now? It's that simple. It is that simple. So that's my story. I truly look at health, and you're going to see a lot of different chiropractors would say this too, but from the definition from the World Health Organization, that it is truly, health is truly a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I want your body to be functioning well. And we're going to go through and just share with you the information as to how amazing your body truly is, because your body adapts to everything you give it. You give it good stuff, it's going to treat you well. But if you give it bad stuff, it's going to do the same. You might get away with the bad stuff for a little bit, but at some point it's going to catch up with you. And so that's what this whole keto course is for. I want you to gain a better knowledge just how your body is working, what it's doing for you every single day, and are you feeding it and nourishing it good things, or are you treating it poorly? Because every bite you take, you're either feeding health or you're feeding illness. So which decision are you making? And which decision are you teaching your children to make? Because we now have a generation of children that aren't going to outlive their parents' life expectancy rate. They have a shorter life expectancy rate than what their parents do. And that's really sad. We have a generation of children that so many of them are ending up with type 2 adult onset diabetes, to the point that we don't even call adult onset diabetes anymore. We just call it type 2 diabetes. So we used to see adult onset after, years, after a lifetime, 40 years, whatever, how many years it took for somebody to develop a poor eating habits for them to end up with type 2 diabetes. But now we're seeing it so often in children, we've gotten rid of that term. So it's a big wake-up call when we see children that are really sick, when they've got a lot of different issues going on, and so many things. Every single bite that you take, you're nourishing every single cell in your body. Are you nourishing it well, or are you not? So we're going to go through keto nutrition.
So let's go ahead and get into the PowerPoint here. So like I said, this is the very basics of ketogenic nutrition. So if you've been doing keto for a while, this might be very simple and basic for you. So this might not be the presentation for you. If you're stuck at a plateau, hopefully there'll be something that you might say, oh, wow, that could help me. Maybe you just need a push to make sure that you're making healthier decisions for your spouse, for your children, or just to be a role model. So like I just said, we're going to get back to the basics. Why is that so important? Because literally what you're eating every single day is nourishing your cells. And so good food in means good results. Bad food in actually obviously means bad results. Every time that you eat, I want you to really, really consider this. So this is why I continue to say it. Every time you eat, you are either nourishing health and wellness or you are feeding disease. So what decision are you making? How are the decisions that you're choosing today going to contribute to your health in 10, 20, or 30 years down the road? Will you be waking up at 40 saying, how in the world did I get here? And even more importantly, how are the decisions that you're making for your children today going to impact their health as an adult? So, like I said, your body adapts. And so I want to really get into nutrition because your body is going to adapt to what you give it. Your body's constantly replicating cells. Who you are today, you're going to have the same organs and all of that 7 years down the road, but those cells have all regenerated. So here are a couple little statistics about the human body. Again, pretty simple. You might think, why are you giving me this info, Dr. Lisa? But it all is going to make a lot of sense here in a little bit. So the average body contains anywhere from 50 to 100 trillion cells. Look at that number there of how many atoms your body's made up of is 7 octillion. I mean, that's like what, 27 zeros after that 7? There are literally 10 times the amount of bacteria in the human body as there are cells. You're going to learn about some of that in the presentations for gut health, right? But really consider that one. It's estimated that the body is made up of 60,000 miles of blood vessels. So if you lay those end to end, it could wrap around the earth 2.5 times. We all know this. I'm sure you've heard this. Average human body is more than 50% water. Your brain is made up of 80% water. The average human brain contains 100 billion nerve cells. Your stomach lining replaces itself every 3 to 4 days. You breathe in and out 20,000 times a day. There are 7,200 nerve endings in every single foot. Like I said, your body regenerates itself. They typically say every 7 years. Red blood cells can last 4 months. White blood cells regenerate every year. So every cell in your body is regenerating at its own pace. The colon wall replicates every 4 days, while the cells of your stomach, like I just said, that digest food actually replicate every couple of hours. But there are some cells that don't regenerate. So those are the neurons in your brain or in the cerebral cortex. They don't regenerate. So once you kill them off, they're gone. But like I said, who you are today and what you're eating is going to dictate the quality of who you are down the road. So that fuel that you put in your body dictates the quality of those cells. So I know I keep saying it, but hopefully it might take a couple times to really hit it home for certain people. You put junk in, you're going to get junk out, right? So put in more good stuff, you're going to get better results. And what I really love is as people start to incorporate better food, they're going to be craving better food, right? And so a lot of times I'll hear people say this is that, I eat fast food, but I only choose the healthy option at a fast food restaurant. And I really challenge them because there's nothing healthy at a fast food restaurant. You can tell me that you eat the apple slices there, but really start to think about it is, if I cut an apple right now, how many minutes would it take before it would start to brown on its own? Now think of the apple slices you're picking up wherever. When do you think those apple slices were sliced, or when the apple was sliced, and what chemicals are on it for it still to appear super crisp and fresh? How many days later, however long later it is when you're actually getting that? I'll hear the excuse a lot, like I only eat fast food when I'm traveling. Well, really start to just prepare a little bit more. Like being healthy will take a little bit more preparation, but I always tell people my ideal fast food, quote unquote, would be an avocado, right? An avocado, it's got its own little paper wrapper. It's not really a paper wrapper. It's the shell of the avocado, right? The skin of the avocado. But if you have that, it's great. You can slice it open and you can eat it with a spoon. And that's think of it, that's nature's fast food. So you are what you eat. And let's look at our ancestors again, like Paleolithic men and women. They lived pretty long, active lives. I think a lot of people think they died early, but they pretty much lived longer lives unless they were chased by a lion and they died. They did really short bursts of activity. They ate with the seasons and they ate what they could find. So think of that. They had grass-fed animals, right? Like true grass-fed animals. You think of that. Those animals weren't eating corn and soy while caged in a feedlot, right? They ate what was in season. What does that mean? I'm from Michigan. What type of fruits grow in Michigan in the winter? Really not much of anything. And so in order for us to have fresh fruit, it's typically being flown in from somewhere. So, our ancestors weren't getting that type of stuff. They ate nuts and seeds and good healthy fats. They went through feast and famine time periods. So how do we get to that ideal of how we should be eating? It's baby steps. Right? I said this before. It's just like when your child starts to learn to walk. It's baby steps. So if literally the only thing you did today was to eat a handful of spinach, and if you decided to do that tomorrow and the next day and the next day, do you think you would be healthier a week from now than where you are today? And what if you kept that up for several months and you kept it up for a year? Where would your health be at that point in comparison today? Do you think you'll be sicker or healthier? Right? So let's look at some of the stuff that we're eating every day. And then I'm going to give you some simple steps to start to incorporate better health decisions, better food decisions into your diet and transitioning toward a ketogenic diet. So do you think there's something that you're consuming every single day that could have significant negative effects on your health? Let's really think about it. How about if I told you this? There's something that's probably in your diet if you're the typical American, that's eating like a typical American diet or the standard American diet or that SAD diet as they talk about. This product that you're eating pretty much could stress the immune system. It increases fat in the body. It increases triglycerides. It may cause hormonal imbalances. It may contribute to problems with learning. It may increase blood pressure. It may contribute to Alzheimer's, and it's an addictive substance. Any ideas as to what it is that you could be eating every single day that could have those impacts or those ramifications? Right, there it is. It's sugar. So there is, when we say sugar, yes, I'm talking refined sugar, but I'm also talking other forms of sugar. But right now, let's just think of sugar syrups, and we'll dig into all that stuff. It is everywhere in your pantry. It is everywhere in your kitchen. A lot of times people don't even realize where it all is at. And so something to start to become aware of is start reading labels, because sugar is in your pasta sauces and your tomato pasta sauces. to the tune of 15 grams or 4 teaspoons of sugar in a half a cup of sauce. And I always tell people, have you measured a half of a cup of sauce? Like if you're eating pasta, how much sauce do you really think you're putting on top of that pasta? It's in salad dressings. It's especially in your fat-free salad dressings. So when they take the fat out of food, think of the 90s and we all were doing low-fat diets. When you take something out, you've got to put something in. And so that's why I always would laugh with people. When they would eat the entire box of the fat-free cookies, it wasn't a good thing, right? So even though it was fat-free, that wasn't the best thing to do. Obviously, we realized that. We obviously realized that fat-free was the best thing to do. Why do we have such an obesity issue in the United States now, right? Because people did fat-free for a very long time. So in salad dressings, when they take out the fat, and it's a fat-free salad dressing, they replace it, like I said, with sugar. And it is not uncommon to see up to 8 grams of sugar or several teaspoons of sugar in a 2 tablespoon serving of dressing. That's literally over 1/3 of the serving is just sugar. Guess what? It's also in your mayonnaise. So they did a study several years back, and they looked to see how much additional sugar people consumed on a daily basis. So they looked at sugars that included things like table sugar, brown sugar, high fructose corn syrup, pay attention now, honey, molasses, brown syrup, agave syrup, right? How many times people tell me they're doing natural sugars? It is still sugar. So they looked at the sugar that was in things like soft drinks and iced teas and candies, pastries, cookies, canned fruit, remember? They were not adding in the fruit found in actual sugar in 100% juice or other whole foods. But what they found was that people consumed an average of 21.4 teaspoons of added sugar every single day, or more than 320 calories a day from these sources. 21.4 teaspoons of sugar that they didn't know they were eating because it was hidden sugar. That was 16% of these participants' total daily caloric intake was from added sugars. So we know that people with higher sugar intakes are more likely to have lower levels of HDL, that's your good cholesterol, and they typically have higher levels of triglycerides or blood fats. So I tell people, imagine it like this. Would you sit down at your breakfast table and shovel 21.5 teaspoons of sugar in your mouth? You wouldn't do it, but you are, without even realizing that you're doing it. So why is it so important to minimize your sugar intake? And so I'm going to get a little technical because this is where we're going to talk a little bit about body physiology or how the body is working. But how much sugar do you think your body can tolerate at one time before it has to adapt? I.e., the body says, there's a lot of sugar in here. We need to bring it back down to our normal limits. Your body can tolerate 1 teaspoon of sugar at a time. So you're probably sitting here saying, time out, 1 teaspoon, that's not right, Dr. Lisa. I put 2 teaspoons of sugar in my coffee every morning and I'm fine. Like, I'm not going into a diabetic coma. No, you're not, because like I said, your body adapts. So what happens, your sugar goes up because you consumed sugar. So your sugar levels go up into your blood. And so that's when the pancreas, kicks in and says, all right, we got to do our work. We got to bring the sugar levels back down. And that's when you start seeing the whole cascade of hormones that go into effect and they play their role. So that's when insulin comes in and everything starts to do what it needs to do, right? To bring down your sugar levels back to normal. But guess what? Think of a can of soda. How many teaspoons of sugar do you think is in a can of soda? There are 10 teaspoons of sugar. 10 teaspoons. So that's what's happening. All of a sudden you drink this in, your blood sugar rises in your body. And that's when the body says, hold on, we got to adapt right now. There's a lot of sugar happening in here. And so throughout this process of players of insulin, of glucagon, all sorts of stuff that's going on, your blood sugar levels get back towards normal. And then guess what? This is when we go through our sugar highs and lows and highs and lows. And so think of a typical American. If you wake up in the morning and you shovel in a bunch of carbohydrate breakfast or something, that this is spiking your sugar and then it drops. So mid-morning, we get hungry again, right? So we eat something else, think of whatever typical stuff is. So, levels will go up and then they go back down again. And so then we go through lunch and have a high carbohydrate lunch, and then it drops after lunch, right? That 2 o'clock lull. So we're going through this up and down and up and down and up and down. And so when we see that happening all the time with insulin levels raising up, and then they drop, and then up, and then they go down, that's when you can start to see things like diabetes. And I know there's other presentations going into that, so I don't want to really dig into that so much. But the common thing is start reading your labels and becoming aware of actually how much sugar you actually are eating. Because I hear this a lot. I don't eat sugar. But when you start to read your labels, you're going to be a little bit more in tune and aware. And I'm not just talking white sugars. You've also got to realize that certain things, carbohydrates, break down into sugar. Because a lot of times people will tell me that they're choosing a healthier option, and so they're using a lemonade or they're using a juice. Start to read some of those things. Breakfast shakes. Your fruits with canned syrup, your energy drinks. You will be absolutely amazed at how much sugar you're consuming on a daily basis. Excuse me. One of the things I really want you to think of is orange juice, with how often people start out with a glass of orange juice in the morning. So if you were to eat an orange, what happens is when you take the peel off, you've now got the orange with all of the fiber in it. And you're going to take some time to chew that orange. And so the fiber is going to help to slow the digestion of that orange. And how many ounces of juice do you think you would get out of that orange? But if you sit there and pour a 10-ounce glass of orange juice in the morning, how many oranges do you think were juiced to get that? And now you've taken out that fiber that you're going to take some time to slowly chew it. And now you're just chugging it down. And one of the things I want you to look at this is how much sugar is in a 10-ounce glass of orange juice. Typically, there's 29 grams of sugar. That's equivalent to almost a can of pop. So how many people would start out their morning with a can of pop? Some people do, or soda. But, start to think and look at things in that perspective. How are you starting off your mornings? What are you fueling your cells with right off? Are you choosing some water first thing? So something to look at it that way. So I want to dig into a little bit about macros. You're going to hear this term thrown around a lot also within the summit. So there's 3 different ways that you can fuel, food in to help fuel your body. And so we can fuel our body with carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So we're going to dig into 2 of those. Carbohydrates are going to be your breads and pastas, your fruits, and all of that, right? Grams of carbs. I think most people understand. If you're doing a keto summit right now, you understand carbohydrates. But when carbohydrates, you've got glucose. You are a sugar burner. You are running your cells, or your body is running on glucose. So that's when you're eating the carbohydrates. That's what it's breaking down to. This is when you're going through everything we just spoke about with the sugar. You can also be a fat burner. So that's when you're eating good quality fats, and when you really are truly like in ketosis, when your body is fat adapted, what will happen is that your body will make ketones from that fat. And so that's when you can be burning fat for fuel rather than burning sugar for fuel, right? So that's digging into ketosis of what we're looking at. Excuse me. So what exactly is ketosis? Is ketosis something new? Right? I think it's, like I said, it's a huge buzzword now. Last couple of years, it's overtaken the Google search engines. A lot of people will say, oh, ketosis, I know, that Atkins thing, right? That was that diet from the 90s or 70s or whatever era that they did Atkins in. But really, ketosis is nothing new. Research-wise, it's been going on. They've been doing research on it for a long while. But going back to our Paleolithic ancestors, like I said, we would go through time periods of feasting where we had a lot of an abundance of food, and we would also go through time periods of famine where food was not plentiful. And so for your body basically to help fuel itself during those time periods of famine, it would tap into the fat stores. And so that fat would then go toward the liver, and the liver would make ketones to fuel the body. So literally, it was your body's adaptation to feast and famine time periods, or to famine time periods, as ketosis. And so to dig into some of the history of it, in the 1800s, there were some people that started utilizing it, realizing some fat loss efforts with it. There was, if you look into the Banting diet, late 1800s, it was, I believe it was an undertaker. He lost a ton of weight using, when he cut out a lot of the carbohydrates, the breads and pastas he figured out. And so it was the Banting diet. He had a whole paper that he did. And then to roll into the late 1800s, here in the United States, there was a guy, and I just drew a blank. Oh, Hugh, I drew a blank on his name. It'll come back to me. But he was kind of like the grandfather of Muscle Magazine type stuff. But he started a bunch of health clinics or sanitariums throughout the United States, and they started finding that if people were fasting, um, there was a decreased likelihood of seizures. So basically, for epileptic seizures is when it started going through that route. Bernard McFadden was his name, and Hugh Conklin was his osteopath physician that was working with him. And so they started doing some research on epileptic seizures, and they didn't know what was happening. They just knew that if these people fasted for a while, they wouldn't have these seizures. They kind of said, oh, it must be because we're clearing toxins out of the body. But later on, they realized the body was making ketone bodies, and that's what was actually going on. And it was, ketosis was used for a while for epilepsy. And then with the discovery of different medications, and obviously trying to get to a strict keto diet, obviously medications took over. And so that kind of disappeared throughout the 30s and 40s of using ketosis. And so it kind of disappeared. And then you fly into some of the history of between the 1950s and the 1970s. It was really late 1970s was when Ansel Keys' study, the 7-country study, came out. But he started the study back in the early 50s. And you can Google Ansel Keys, Ancelkeyes. Basically, that's the one. He's a doctor who we all figured out that, hey, cholesterol was coming from fat. And there's a lot that you can Google and search out different, I'll just say controversial subjects now, since he passed away in the mid 2004, I think. There's a lot of stuff that has come out regarding those studies. On how valid that study was. But basically, since the 50s, we've been taught that fat was bad. I always think of growing up in the 80s and everybody eating their promised margarine because they thought it was so good for your heart. And now we obviously know differently. But really, that's the history of ketosis. It's nothing new. It's not this new, diet where you can lose a lot of fat. It's literally your body's adaptation. So I guess we covered that. Is it new? So here's another step for you. Be aware. I know this sounds stupid. You're going to look at it. Well, eat when you're hungry, of course. But really pay attention. Maybe it's something to journal. I don't know. But pay attention to how often you're eating. And are you really, truly hungry? Or are you feeding an emotion? Are you bored? Are you, we could go through all sorts of stuff, but really pay attention to it that way. A lot of times you might be thirsty. What if you drank some water? Right? But really pay attention. Eat when you're hungry. Start counting your carbs. If you're a typical American, you're probably eating hundreds of grams of carbohydrates each day. I know that sounds asinine, but you probably are. And so I always tell our patients, let's look at getting down toward 100 grams first. Some people kind of really freak out at that point, but I do baby steps. Some people can. I can tell them, go down to 20 grams of carbs. That's what I want to see you doing. And some people can do that, but there are a lot of people that need baby steps. So just start counting your carbs first and become aware. If you're eating 500 grams of carbs each day, or if you're eating 200 grams of carbs each day, just become aware of that, right? There's a lot of apps out there that you can actually track stuff on your phone to figure out how many carbohydrates you're taking in, because ideally, like I said, I want a diet of not a lot of processed foods. So you're not going to be able to pull out a piece of lettuce and see how many grams of carbohydrates are in that. But there are different apps that you can find that. So just start counting your carbs, become more aware, drink more water, right? And especially as you start into a ketogenic diet, good quality salt, pink Himalayan salt, sea salt will have good trace minerals in it. So that's something to start using that, salting your foods, not the salt you're going to pick up at the grocery store, but really good quality salt. And then also, you can use that with your water. Make sure you have adequate water. Typical way to figure out your water intake is to take your body weight and divide it in 2, and that's how many ounces of water I want you to strive for each day. For most people, it's about 8 to 10 cups of water. Add in more good. I already covered that. Like I said, if you just only started eating a handful of spinach each day, a week from now, do you think you'd be healthier or sicker? Like reality. And fast forward a year, where will you be? But as you add in more good, your body's going to want, and it's going to crave more good because you're going to start feeling better. You're going to want to do more, right? So add in more good. Sleep. It's an important one. It's a very important one. I teach all of our patients that, think of whenever you're sick and how tired you get. There's a reason your body's healing. When you sleep is when your body heals. There's a lot of processes that happen when you're sleeping. The other thing is when we're not sleeping, hormones can really start to shift. Things like your adrenals, which again, I don't want to get way too technical in this, but your adrenal glands maintain cortisol levels, and there's a cascade of that. But good quality sleep is going to be so important to your health. So really just make sure we can dig into all sorts of stuff about the amount of light that you're exposed to after, as the sun goes down and that type of stuff. But even just really pay attention and just start focusing in on how much quality sleep are you getting. A lot of times when people change their diet too, we start to see you can sleep better too, which is really good. So that's the basics, right? So again, if you're advanced in keto, you're probably like, wow, that's really simple. That was a stupid presentation, but I listened to this. But hopefully, if you're brand new to keto, we made that simple for you to understand, just some simple steps. So also, I wanted to go a little bit about testing for ketone bodies. So there are three different, when your body's making ketones, there's three different types. There's acetone, there's acetoacetate, and there's beta hydroxybutyrate, right? Those are the three ketone bodies that your liver makes. So acetone is one of those that you think of. People typically that go into a keto diet, sometimes you'll hear, wow, you get really stinky breath. Well, that's acetone that's coming off of the breath. You can test that through breath meters. There's several on the market that you can check out that way. Typically, people think about testing ketone bodies by doing it with urine strips, right? That you can pick them up at the local pharmacy from, Amazon, wherever. That one, you are testing acetoacetate. So for a while, when you first get into ketosis, people will notice like, hey, I see this. It's on my, it's on the urine strips. I can see this, that I'm in ketosis, and then it disappears, and they kind of get frustrated and they don't think they're in ketosis anymore. But what happens is it's as you become more fat adapted, your body is actually utilizing fat for fuel and is able to do that. Your body's going to start utilizing ketones. So you're not going to necessarily see it showing up on that urine strip. And so the best way to really test for ketones is beta hydroxybutyrate, which is in your blood. And there are different blood meters out there that you can test that way too. So we will have some presentations on that later, but I just wanted to give you the basic information here because some people want to know how do you figure out if you're in ketosis? If you really want to technically know, that's how you're going to figure it out, is through those three different, and there are, like I said, different testing ways to do that. So this is just my basic information. You can follow us at the American Institute of Healthy Living there on Facebook. You've got my office page there, our website. And then I also have a private group on Facebook that people, I post a lot of different recipes and stuff there. You can find that group through the American Institute of Healthy Living. So I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you are enjoying the presentations.